What is up, people of the JSA? Welcome to my Stargirl Season 3, Episode 7, Infinity Inc. Part 1 review, breakdown, and recap, of course. I do apologize that I didn't get this up yesterday in a normal time, but there's been a bunch of videos on the channel now. I do recommend checking out my Black Adam review. I did an official trailer breakdown for Titan Season 4, but finally I'm getting to Stargirl, and this episode certainly, I know I say this every week, but this one finally is getting into the meat of Mr. Bones, Helix, and what's going on there. And I feel like a lot of the theories that everyone in the Stargirl community has been coming up with regards to Obsidian and who really is the main villain there are starting to come out into the light quite a bit more. So if you go on to enjoy this video, guys, do let me know by just leaving your support, and you can do that through the form of the like button. It takes 2 seconds. I notice a bunch of you aren't subscribed to the channel, so double check if you aren't. Maybe you would like to be. Just hit that subscribe button. But let's finally get into this. And one thing I was happy about is that finally we've got Jenny back, Green Lantern if you will, and it started off with that flashback, the scene that we've actually seen before. But what I liked about what they did here is that they showed way back then when we first saw that scene, at the exact same time we had her brother Todd going to dinner, or a little kind of break-in dinner in some place with, I believe, his boyfriend. He wanted to celebrate his birthday, and this is when Jenny puts the ring on, and not only does it activate this Green Lantern energy in her eye, but it seemingly activates something going on with him. I think there's a bit of dark energy. Well, yeah, there is quite a bit of Shadowlands energy, and that's because, if you didn't know already, Todd Rice's powers in the comics as Obsidian do also share that commonality with the Shade, and that is the power source of the Shadowlands. And you can already, if you're not aware already, see where this might be going in terms of the villain reveal of this season, and how Mr. Bones and Helix Institute might be, believe it or not, maybe I'm going crazy here, trying to help in their own kind of weird way. Now, this is when the cops arrive, and I don't know if this was super well explained, but it seems that they already had the task of trying to find Todd Rice on behalf of Dr. Love and Mr. Bones, and they got paid for their services of delivering him to Helix Institute. I don't know if I'm being a bit too nitpicky here. It's just, if he hadn't really been causing troubles because his full Shadowlands powers hadn't been melting down from like this moment onwards, and as we get up to in present day, and we'll talk about those warnings from Todd a little bit later, I was just a bit confused. Maybe they've been hunting for the children of Alan Scott Green Lantern ever since he died. It's just a bit not so thoroughly explained there. Not that everything needs to be thoroughly explained. It just, I wonder how Mr. Bones and everyone was always looking for Todd Rice and how far back that goes. Now, this is where we see Mr. Bones say, you see, I understand what it is to be different, Mr. Rice, but different can be good. And I feel like the Mr. Bones look has only ever so subtly changed, just in terms of how they bring out the transparency of his skin to the skull. I think he does look awesome, and I do believe that they are trying to treat Todd, but I also do feel like they might be trying to, as per the episode title, set up a bit of an Infinity Inc. team. He's trying to prevent Todd of what we're about to get into with a couple of theories through that very harsh treatment, but maybe this difference that can be good can be brought about in the form of a team just equipped by Mr. Bones. So I don't think Mr. Bones is the villain that necessarily everyone has been thinking he could be, and I was saying that actually last season. He's not always black or white bad, so to speak. It's sometimes a little bit in between. So I do think he's going to be shady here this season, no pun intended there, but I don't think it's going to be as simple as, oh, Mr. Bones evil, torturing Todd. No, there's definitely something else going on there. Meanwhile, picking up from the end of last episode where we had it revealed that the JSA found out that Mr. Bones is watching them, not that they know it's Mr. Bones in this moment. They're trying to act normal around the table. Now, this could be a bit corny, but I have to admit, Pat and the way he was acting did make me smile quite a few times. We have Rick playing board games with Zeke and Jakeem. Meanwhile, we have Yolanda at work and her mum. God, I really don't like it when her mum comes into the show. I know that's the point of her character. Is meant to be a bit of a frustrating time for Yolanda whenever she's involved, and it's just the whole after everything you've done. I really don't like that long-term punishment here, and I know they're probably going to address that, but I think after the everything she's done is ever since that picture she sent to Jake Austin Walker's Brainwave Jr. In the first season leaked out, it brought that shame upon her family, I guess, that her mum has stigmatized and stuck with. And I don't know, man, without going on about this for too much longer, I really can't stand it too much. But something happens later, which makes me very happy. Thank you, Yolanda. So the JSA have a plan, and that is for Beth to break the Blue Valley firewall or whatever and shut down the power grid so they can go around and bust every camera. And I don't know what the proper smarts behind this was, because I feel like Mr. Bones and Helix could kind of deduce that it was the JSA who took the cameras out. Also, I do feel like there is something else that was rubbing me the wrong way. They were doing all of this so they could do it sneaky, right, and take the cameras out in the dark. And they were trying to act normal, right, until the power grid went down. But then you just have like moments with Rick just staring at the camera. And it's just moments like that that take me out the episode a little bit, because the episode is trying to portray it one way, but then you have these obvious moments with characters like last episode at the end, they're like, act normal. And then in this episode, you have them acting normal or trying to overly act normal, which was funny, but then Rick just staring at the camera. And so we have the team going after the cameras. Now, Sylvester for this episode sat on the bench, so to speak. I guess they didn't want him more directly involved in the script because he could have been pretty helpful. And so the excuse was that he was going around doing the other cameras in town, even though he did somewhat feature through voiceover to Beth and Yolanda and whatnot. I do find the dialogue a little bit weird sometimes, so when they go to the JSA table, Beth's just like, the camera was pointing right over there. We're definitely being targeted then. And Beth's just like, well, Sylvester thinks so. I wonder if Courtney thinks so. And it's just like, why is this even being pondered? Because you have cameras in your literal houses, like Courtney's house, and I don't really know what the point of that. I know Rick kind of was like, well, we're being targeted then, but they also put that line off as if, yeah, well, Sylvester thinks so, and I wonder if Courtney thinks so, I think so. It's just like, it shouldn't even be a conversation, but I realize I'm probably being a bit too harsh. Now, this is where Rick, as I thought, the repercussions of him taking out the inhibitor from the hourglass would be like roid rage. Taking too many steroids, as what roid rage is, you get a little bit amped. As Rick said, I'm sorry, but I did find the lines a little bit corny here. Now, I do know that's probably intentional. For example, when Rick says, I am amped, so it's like, what? I gotta flex. It feels good. And I'm just like, But he was unnecessarily punching the beams, like completely crushing a desk in the school. Even though Rick, when he's in Hourman mode, even before this in previous seasons, he is an impulsive character. He does get a bit too showy with his powers sometimes, but now that's on like overdrive because of having the strength turned on all the time. There's no other way to put it than he is simply experiencing roid rage. He kind of has a bit of a reliance now on this 24/7 strength, and he's not going to want to let it go easily. Now with Courtney and Pat, they're in the basement taking some cameras down there, and this is when the Shade arrives asking for Courtney's help, and he ends up just kind of taking her, and Pat gets sucked up in the little Shade transportation, and he says that his abilities have been on the fritz, and we find out that he's actually been working with Jenny to try and fix this problem, and that's because she is somewhat directly involved. Courtney asks Jenny what the heck's going on. She's like, I found my brother, which is when we get a flash to Todd, and he's essentially being held on this table in this room. He's kind of being subjected to this light treatment. I guess that's meant to keep the Shadowlands Obsidian side of himself dormant, because if it's not dormant, then as he kind of teases in a few moments time, he's going to destroy the world. Now, just like a lot of us keen-eyed viewers kept attention to when the Shade transported in earlier episodes, we saw those little green specks of energy, and this is when the Shade says that he's been suffering with that, and we found out this all happened because of something that I kind of forgot about, to be honest, and that's when Jenny's ring immediately blasted some of that little black goo, and it somewhat corrupted the ring and actually connected the Green Lantern's energy source to the Shadowlands. So those two power sources are kind of tripping over each other, thus making Jenny and the Shade connected, but also somewhat, I guess, destroying them at the same time. Now, as for like the explanation or the hypothesis behind how they think they're gonna fix this, I did find it a little bit, this must be it. Jenny was like, Courtney, you can help me overcome the darkness within me. How did you do that? And then they essentially came to the conclusion that maybe through saving Todd, that might be the thing that helps expel the darkness out of her ring and get her back to normal. And I guess there's some logic here, but it just does feel like something that they've come up with that really might not remotely work, and they just kind of go with it. I mean, of course, it's something that needed to be done anyway. You don't want your brother being tortured there, even though, well, he's not being tortured, he's being treated, and maybe needs to be treated to prevent what could come in future episodes. But also at the same same time, I guess they have no other alternative. It's not like they have another Green Lantern source necessarily to blast light into the ring or into Jenny to completely exorcise that darkness. Because when we saw that black blob go into the ring, it also like put darkness in her eyes as well. So I guess she herself has got that Shadowlands energy, not being able to truly equip the ring the way it's meant to be done. Meanwhile, with Yolanda, she goes back home to try and find the cameras there. Her mum comes in. I'm going to talk about this very briefly. And she's like demanding to see her phone. She doesn't trust her, thinks it could be drugs or worse or whatever. And Yolanda finally sticks up for herself. She's like, well, you can leave the house then. And I was just like, yeah, fine, I'll leave the house. And that's exactly what she does, which will obviously pave a way for her friendship to be mended with Courtney, because she goes to the Whitmore home since she has nowhere else to turn, and she's going to be staying there for a little bit. This could predictably end up in a storyline where, because she's old enough to live her own life and be trusted by her mum might finally come to accept that. It's probably going to be a bit cliche, and I do think that is ultimately the way it should turn out, because at the end of the day, you can't hold something over this forever on your daughter. Not that I even think that it's something that Yolanda should have really been punished for, just maybe have a conversation with regards to that season 1 storyline, even though I guess they're getting at perhaps the strict parenting, such as the religious side of it and whatnot, and maybe they'll come to be like, you know what, you're right, we've been too harsh, we should trust you. But it just felt good to see Yolanda just go like, fine, you, Mum. So end of the episode now, we cut back to Todd. We're with Mr. Bones. He actually even says 6 months and it's only gotten worse. We need to be more aggressive with the treatment before we lose control. And you can tell that Dr. Love almost even feels bad about this as she's turning the dial up, which does show that, you know, these people aren't necessarily inherently bad the way that some fans feel as though they have been set up. And you have to think that the powers that Todd has could be down to the theories that certain fans have had with him being the killer. And that would explain how Sylvester gets completely launched up into the air. It explains how the Gamblers trailer got completely wrecked. But that would entail that he has escaped and somehow they've managed to get him back. Maybe if he hulks out in Obsidian mode, he kind of is just found unconscious on the floor and then they've brought him back to Helix. I feel like we need some explanations with stuff like that if it does turn out to be true that Todd, unbeknownst to himself or in a way that he can't control, has actually been the murderer to the Gambler. I'm not fully set on that, but it does seem like this is becoming more and more likely. But I hope that they don't skip over, okay, if he's ultra super world threatening or world destroying powerful, then how did you get him back to Helix? That's only if he did, you know, kill the Gambler. So we have Jenny enter. She says, I'm your sister. And Todd is just like, no, you can't. If you take me out of this room, I'll destroy the world. So again, with that logic, then that means Mr. Bones is trying to prevent that from happening. But you could argue in another theory that maybe he's just been told that he's going to destroy the world, and that might not be true. But I'm tending to believe that his powers are getting out of control, and Mr. Bones is trying to prevent that. And the, you know, Institute for Troubled Youths with powers like his could actually live up to its name. It's just it might not be done in the most ethical way, but just Mr. Bones' way of tackling things. Whereas if Courtney was trying to help Todd in the JSA, they would probably try a much more ethical way rather than just being constantly tortured to try and keep the Obsidian side of himself in. But this is where, like, he kind of explodes almost. And we actually see the kind of CGI form of Obsidian, you could say, somewhat being kept on the table through the existing light, but trying to get out more and more. And so Obsidian, in this moment, it looks like something's gonna happen, so Pat steps in the way with the shade to protect Courtney and Jenny, and you don't know if Obsidian escapes, but I assume that he does. But either way, with whatever happens, that is when Pat and the shade are transported to the Shadowlands. And I can't tell if this is like a classical version of Blue Valley, because people do drive classical cars there, but the people aren't dressed in like super classical clothing. Either way, regardless of the time, we know that also from the promo of next episode, also just being in the Shadowlands in of itself, it will show you your fears, as the shade says. So we're probably going to see some possible cool things from Pat's prior life as Stripe C, maybe his time in the JSA. This could lend some cool cameos, but I really don't know where it will go. But considering now that we're going to have Pat and the shade escape the Shadowlands, just like Cindy and Courtney did last season, that could provide for quite an entertaining episode. And of course, with Mr. Bones in the fold, and let's just assume that Obsidian has escaped, we're gonna have him talking to Courtney now, and everyone really starting to talk to each other about what the heck is going on, how they can handle it, how they can stop Todd from losing control without killing him. So that's probably the projection for the rest of the season, or at least for now. And for this episode, I enjoyed it. It was kind of straightforward. We've got some more developments in ways that have really made things a lot more obvious now with Todd, Mr. Bones. But let me know your ideas if you have any theories with regards to Mr. Bones. Is he really trying to help him there and prevent him from destroying the world? Or do you think there is maybe some ulterior motive there if he wanted to maybe recruit Todd, if he was successfully treated, to maybe form an Infinity Inc. team? Maybe that was his thing there. But then again, what you have to remember is, why put the CCTV up everywhere? Do you think that was a preventative measure to keep an eye on if Obsidian escaped, where he could be? Or if that's not the case, okay, then what's the deal with the CCTV? Now, obviously, things with Rick are going an interesting route. I think it's going to go fairly predictable in one sense, but I don't know how it's ultimately going to end. Like, is he going to really fall out with some people in the team, and are they going to have to try and break through to him? And also, what's going on with Grundy? We've had that storyline completely paused for many episodes now. I don't know if that's going to amount to anything eventually. But all in all, I enjoyed this episode. Looking forward to see where things go. Stargirl is cooking along nicely. I don't think there's been anything mind-blowing, but I am still really enjoying myself when I tune in each week. So let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. We'll be reading every single one of your comments and ideas. Let me know what you thought of this episode in general, your favorite part, what's going on with Rick, Mr. Bones, Obsidian. What do you think we could see in the Shadowlands with Shade and Pad? But other than that, would really appreciate a like on this video, guys. Do consider subscribing if you're not subscribed. As I said, most of you on my analytics show that the people who watch haven't actually clicked that button. But until then, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you members of the JSA in the next video. Goodbye.